Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. I hope you've been refreshed and fortified by coffee. I can stop shouting now. Refreshed and fortified by coffee, and I'll keep talking for another 30 seconds while people are walking in the door. We've got a fascinating panel on austerity or something else. People don't like the term austerity. They like to call it fiscal consolidation or fiscal discipline or, expansive, what is it? Expansive fiscal contraction or some such terms. We've had the president of the European Commission who said austerity has run its course, that even if the policy is economically correct, it's becoming politically unsustainable. And to discuss that, we've got a great panel, really, of sort of wide variety of opinions and views. Starting on my left, we've got Valdis Dombrovskis, the Prime Minister of Latvia, poster child of the policy of fiscal discipline in the EU anyway, and now seeking to lead his country into the euro next year. We've got Fernando Teixeira dos Santos, I hope I've pronounced it correctly, the former Minister of Finance of Portugal, who led his country into a bailout. We've got Federica Mogherini, a member of the Italian Parliament and a member of the Democratic Party, whose former deputy leader is now Prime Minister of Italy, Enrico Letta. And we've got Anders Åslund of the Peterson Institute, co-author of a book with Mr. Dombrovskis, and a scourge of Keynesianism across Europe. I hope I'm not oversimplifying. Let me maybe I'll pick up a theme from yesterday's opening session in which the president of Estonia made the point that essentially the problem was one of rules, that Southern Europeans didn't follow the rules, and he felt a degree of schadenfreude at what was now happening in Southern Europe, the countries that were telling Eastern Europe that they weren't fit for the euro, indeed fit for the European Union, are now having to bail out Southerners. Anders Åslund said that what has been happening is all very healthy, so that Southern Europe begins a process of reform. Governments that fail are rightly punished by the voters and deserve to be kicked out. So I think on that note, I should ask Fernando Teixeira first about the nature of Portugal's problem. Was it one of rules that Portugal didn't follow the 3% and 60% rule? And did your government deserve to be kicked out?
I can start with your the last part of your question. I respect the voters' decisions, and if they decide to kick us out, probably they were right. That was their desire, so I must not complain and respect the will of Portuguese voters. In what concerns the respect for rules, I'm not sure this is exclusively a problem of fulfilling the rules. Portugal had an excessive deficit in 2005. We had until 2008, according to our stability program, to correct that situation. We were able to correct it 1 year earlier than expected in 2007, reducing deficit and curbing down the debt ratio, which was at that time below the euro area average. So at the same time, we were conducting important reforms in our pension system, in our public administration, in education, and also measures regarding the labor market. There was an ongoing agenda of reforms at the same time when we were hit by the crisis. Let me recall also a country that is not in a rescue package, but is also in trouble, which is Spain. Spain had a budget surplus and had a debt ratio below 60% of GDP when was hit by the crisis. And Spain is in trouble also. So I think this is somewhat some kind of a simplistic view of fulfilling or not fulfilling the rules. The major question, in my opinion, should be the following. Why did markets react so strongly during the crisis or after the 2008-2009 crisis, when our deficits and also debts were aggravated? Why did they react so strongly at that time? And in some way, markets were very complacent with the level of the public debt, for example, of Italy, Belgium, and Greece when the euro was launched. I think there was a major change in the perspective of markets regarding the ability of countries to overcome these imbalances. And in my opinion, what markets learned during these years of the euro is that the governance or the economic governance of the euro is not providing the appropriate instruments for the euro area to face crises like the one we have to face. And to me, what this crisis is pointing is for the need of a major institutional reform in the euro area. We need to reinforce the economic governance of the euro area. And what I mean with this is that we have to finish what we have started in 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty and was not finished yet. We build up a strong institution on the side of monetary policy, which is providing us with a common monetary policy, and we did not do the same in the fiscal side. So in some way, we have a monetary union, but we don't have a fiscal union. And what is lacking to the euro area is this pillar, which is the pillar of a fiscal union. And countries...
Just to be clear, by fiscal union, what do you mean?
What I mean is that we need a common budget and the fiscal instruments that can allow the euro area to have appropriate policy mechanisms in terms of macroeconomic stabilization policies. And also we need mechanisms of risk pooling regarding the issues of financing sovereigns. I believe that we are needing instruments like Eurobonds or whatever we want to call them. But in my opinion, and I always said that in the meetings of Eurogroups and ECOFINs, that if we need to share risks, we need to share decisions. And this is claiming for a major change in the level of autonomy that still exists at the national level in the conduct of fiscal policies. We need really something that can be side by side with the ECB on the fiscal side. That's the reason why I consider that markets are nervous, because markets perceived that in the situation of crisis that we faced in 2009, and we did not have the appropriate instruments to solve that crisis, and the Greek experience was really a bad one. When the Greek crisis came out, we were unable to provide for the appropriate instruments to solve that crisis. We did not have any kind of instruments. We had to lend money on bilateral operations to Greece. And indeed, the way we faced that crisis, what was not a credible way, because we provided a sign of weakness, because we were not prepared to face a crisis like that.
Thank you very much. I think we should save any more thoughts, because we're going to try and have as much of a discussion as we can, if I can keep everybody to their time. Prime Minister, you want to lead Latvia into the euro. Why? Some countries are talking about leaving the euro, potentially. And secondly, if you were to join the euro, would you like to see Eurobonds, as the former minister suggested?
Okay, thank you. As regards Latvia's intentions to join Eurozone, yes, we stick with a plan to join Eurozone as of January 1st next year. And in fact, already in the next weeks, we expect a convergence report from European Commission and ECB, which we hope it's going to be positive, containing recommendation for Latvia to be invited to join. And we are working with Eurozone countries to ensure that there is support in ECOFIN and in EU Council for those decisions. So then on why do we want to join? It's probably the question is linked with the Eurozone crisis. And if you look at the nature of Eurozone crisis, it's not really euro as a currency crisis. If you look at the euro as a currency, it's doing just fine, both in terms of other currencies, it's both as a global reserve currency. If anyone is worried about euro right now, then euro is too strong, vis-a-vis maybe US dollar, with their quantitative easing, vis-a-vis Japanese yen, with their Abenomics. So it's not a euro as a currency crisis. It's rather financial and economical crisis in certain Eurozone countries, and that's an issue which needs to be dealt with. So from that point of view, our currency, LATS, is anyway pegged to euro. Whatever happens to euro anyway happens to LATS. There are no major reasons for us not to join. And we expect certain positive implications for our economy in terms of lower interest rates, since whatever currency exchange risks there might be calculated by markets between LATS and euro would disappear. We would reduce currency conversion costs because our economy is heavily euroized anyway. We expect also this facilitating foreign investment effect we had seen in Estonia after Estonia joined in 2011. So all in, we see that Latvia should be joining, and so we are moving forward with this. Then to come back to this topic of today's panel on austerity or something else, well, yeah, I was, of course, much surprised landing in this austerity panel in this conference. Somehow it's often debated and somehow associated with effort Latvia had been doing during the crisis. But I also see how this panel is organized. Again, there is some north-south divide, which brings us back to the topic of yesterday's opening panel. But from my side, I would not really overemphasize this divide. Because if you look, for example, 10 years ago, Germany was a sick man of Europe. So something which was discussed in European economy was something entirely different from what's discussed right now. Look, some 4 or 5 years ago, nobody was discussing crisis in Southern Europe, everybody is discussing crisis in Eastern Europe. With all Baltic states in double-digit recession, with Hungary, Latvia, Romania in IMF programs, and so on and so on. Well, now everybody is discussing crisis in Southern Europe. Who knows what we'll be discussing in another 5 or 10 years? So if you look back, things are changing. Countries are doing their adjustments, doing reforms, and this economic landscape keeps changing. So this, just to remember that one shouldn't debate this divide so much, I think. Then on the public debt issue, which is, of course, part of the problem in Eurozone and in EU. But again, if we look, for example, at Japan, public debt is well over 200% of GDP. You look at the US, public debt is somewhat over 100% of GDP. You look at Eurozone, it's somewhat over 90% of GDP. You look at EU 27, it's somewhat below 90% of GDP. So if you just look at those figures, you don't really arrive at the conclusion that it's all about public debt. There has to be something else, which leads us to this question on austerity or something else. And I think for austerity, unfortunately, there is no way around austerity if you are in a situation when financial markets do not trust you. If you need to reduce budget deficit, you need to reduce budget deficit. There's no other recipe for this. But then the question is, so what is this something else? And it seems that it mainly has to do with Europe's competitiveness. And this is an issue that we are discussing, austerity or growth. Well, Latvia is a country which has so far done most austerity in EU 27 and now having the fastest growth in EU 27. So probably there's not so much contradiction in this. So really it's competitiveness and growth. So that's what you need to address if you want to also grow out of the current problems and also have economic growth to facilitate reduced debt burdens. And on this competitiveness part, again, there are no miracle solutions, but there are quite a few things we can do in Europe to improve EU's competitiveness and to actually facilitate economic growth. It has to do with a fuller implementation of a EU internal market, including in services, full implementation of the Services Directive. It has to do with a digital single market, with labor market reforms in quite a few of EU countries, in bigger and more targeted spending in research and development, in reducing administrative burden, cutting red tape, so facilitating entrepreneurship. So, and each of those steps per se is not bringing big or major benefits. There are estimates if we were to more fully implement internal market, including Services Directive, this will probably add some 2% to EU's GDP. On digital single market, estimates vary, go up to 4%. On concluding, for example, free trade agreement with US, 0.5%. So those are not miracle solutions, but if you work on them, if you implement them, you actually see more growth coming, and you see this way out of those problems. And then to come back to this topic of austerity or fiscal discipline, I think important steps had been taken in terms of agreeing on fiscal discipline treaty or fiscal compact, well, where 25 countries have agreed, including, by the way, all southern countries, and it's UK and Czech Republic which stayed out, and not for the reasons that they were against austerity, but for entirely different reasons. I think it's just now needs to be implemented what is decided. And on those fiscal discipline, I personally like to use the example of Estonia, which made a balanced budget law in early 1990s. Stating basically budget must be balanced full stop. And of course you can argue that, yeah, it's blunt and does not take into account many economic factors or whatever else. But if we are now to compare, for example, Estonia now has public debt of maybe some 10% of GDP. Latvia has public debt of 40% of GDP, starting from zero in both countries. So, and then having accumulated 30% of GDP more public debt, have we achieved much more than Estonia? Our GDP per capita is smaller, our average wage is smaller, average pension is smaller. So what exactly we achieved with those extra 30% of GDP public debt? It's not very clear. So, and I think having this balanced budget law, Estonia ensured bigger financial stability, higher credit ratings, lower borrowing for the economy, and it was helping more the economy than those purely Keynesian effects you can get just through more deficit spending.
Thank you very much. I'd like to come to the politics of this issue. And the Prime Minister made the point rightly that North may not always be North and South may not always be South, and that things change. Federica, I mean, even if one accepts the economic rationale of fiscal discipline and the need to do it even in times of crisis, or perhaps especially in times of crisis, is it something that Italian politics would allow you to do, even if you're so minded to do? You have a very awkward coalition, Mr. Letta does, and the first thing he said upon being elected was, we can't do more austerity.
Yes, I would say that, well, first of all, let me say that I'm the only not economist here, so I apologize for that, but I hope that being Italian, that could compensate the interest that you have in whatever I say anyway. Having said that, we have done our homeworks in the last year and a half. We have put the budget balance in our constitution. And Italy has lost, and together with this, Italy has lost 10% of its GDP in the last 6-7 years. And Italian GDP is 20% of the Eurozone GDP. So this is to say that, yes, I agree very much on what was said before. Yes, we have, and we have done austerity measures and fiscal discipline. Now it's a turn for the growth compact, for growth, for measures for employment, in our opinion. An Italian point of view on the crisis. I agree very much on what was said. The beginning of the financial crisis came from outside, from the United States, basically in the beginning, found a euro that was not ready to manage it, because the euro project was done only partially. And Europe didn't manage to react to this opportunity, to the challenge, to do what was missing, which is further integration, further political integration, in our opinion. On the contrary, we started a sort of blame game that divided Europe more and more, and that weakened our reaction to the crisis. And here came the second crisis, in our opinion. That was an internal crisis of mistrust, of divisions, of missed opportunities, of reforms. We did the part on the austerity. We didn't do the rest. We didn't do the growth, the investments. We still are not doing that, even if the political mood seems to be changing in Europe now. And we didn't do the further steps on political integration. Let me add a little aspect to what we are discussing now. We believe that the economic crisis became then a social crisis, but also a democratic crisis. I think the last Italian elections showed that very well. And the same is happening all over Europe. We live a paradox where national level of decisions are not enough. They are needed, but they are not enough. So Europe must be part of the solution, and still Europe is part of the problem. And it's quite clear that citizens don't trust European institutions or European projects in these conditions, because we are unveiled the weakness of a not finished project. So what we need to do now, in our point of view, and that's what Prime Minister Letta is going around all over Europe, regardless of north and south, east or west, saying in these days, and that's going to be our commitment in the next European Councils, is that we have now to do two things. First, catch up the gap that we missed in the beginning of the crisis. Do the further steps of integration on the European integration level. Trying in this way also to fill the democratic gap, the deficit of trust of our citizens in the capacity of the European institutions to react, that was shown to be very poor in the last years. And second, finding a balance between austerity measures and growth. I don't say leave the austerity measures and do only investments. I say finding a common balance together. to keep these two things together. Because, and that's not enough to do it country by country, and Italy has shown it very well. It's like if now we've done our own national homeworks, it's time for the EU to do its homework altogether. We have some things that we have to do together. There is no dilemma between national and European belonging or measures. We are one. We are one. And I think that Germany understands it very well. Now, it's quite clear that our economies, our real economies, are linked. So if Italy doesn't grow, also Germany doesn't grow. We are living already in a completely integrated situation. So basically, I think that in this storm we are still in, because it's true that we see the end of it, but we see the end of it in terms of economy, but in terms of the real life of people, we're probably in the worst year of crisis, because they're finishing their savings. I don't know if it's the same in the rest of Europe, but I guess it's the same. No matter when the reaction or the outcome of the crisis will come, but for families, this is the worst year. So we also have to be sure that we fill the gap between our economic and political discourse and everyday life of the people. So in this storm we're still in, either we swim together, we find a way of swimming together, or we sink together. And that's what we're saying. We have to find these two ways: keeping together austerity and growth, and doing the United States of Europe.
Thank you very much. Anders, you've heard the Prime Minister say it's not just about austerity, there's something else. Federica says that something else is the lack of integration. You live and work in a country that is a fully functioning currency union. What is the nature of the problem in the Eurozone? Is it just countries that have not behaved, or is it that the euro itself is somehow breaking economies, particularly in Southern Europe at the moment, because it is an imperfect and flawed construct?
Thank you, Anton. Let me start with this. The economic and monetary union actually worked very well for 7 years, from 1995 until 2002. Then something happened. A person who was then president of the European Commission, Romano Prodi, made this extraordinary statement: the Stability and Growth Pact is stupid. And that was the end of the Stability and Growth Pact, meaning fiscal discipline in Europe. In November 2003, ECOFIN, that is the Council of Ministers of Finance in the European Union, decided to break it up because the three big countries, France, Germany, and Italy, had all violated the budget rule of 3% of GDP in budget deficit, and they intended to continue to do so. And they did, and a few other countries followed. And in 2005, the Stability and Growth Pact was reformed by the Council of the European Union. That is, in other words, finished. And this was the boom years, and there was no fiscal discipline. Some countries, mainly those that were not part of the Eurozone, maintained fiscal discipline, and therefore come out better now. So what we are seeing now is that the EMU is coming back to its roots in the 1990s, when there was fiscal discipline. And indeed, thank you for this. I don't like the word austerity. What we should talk about is fiscal responsibility. Austerity is what you attack people for. Fiscal responsibility is what you claim for yourself. And that's the word I prefer. So what we have seen now, and I think that Minister Teixeira dos Santos explained that pretty well. We have seen a process of, first, it has been clear that nobody will leave the Eurozone. That was essentially done with a Greek default early last year. Secondly, we have got the bailout fund, European Stability Mechanism, so that the The article in the European Treaty against bailout has been nullified. Fortunately, there was an article that contradicted it, so it could be used instead. The European Treaty is normally very flexible, but there are always one paragraph that says something, and then there's another paragraph that says the opposite, just in case. And then thirdly, we have got the fiscal union. And what I would call the fiscal union, it's a revival of a Stability and Growth Pact. And for that to function, it means that the European Commission will have to have more power, will have to have a possibility and say, you can't do this. It should not be with the European Council, that is the governments. But here we have a problem with 3 big countries, not Italy in this case, but Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, that want more power with the European Council than with the European Commission. Essentially, all the other members of the European Union prefer that the European Commission has more power. And then the third thing that has happened is that Greece did a default and it did not leave. So it shows that it's possible to do a default. Sometimes a default is necessary, then it has to be done. I think that Greece, Portugal, and perhaps Italy, no, hardly Italy, will need some kind of debt relief. And if you call it default or not, that's less important. It's simply that you reduce the interest rate and you provide some kind of subsidies through the European Union. Because these debt levels that particularly Greece and Portugal have are not sustainable. Something needs to be done. And then finally, we have a banking union. And what the banking union means, that there will be a common supervision, that there will be a common resolution mechanism, and also a common bailout fund for banks, as we effectively see working now with Spain, where the banks in Spain are being bailed out directly by the European Stability Mechanism and not through the Spanish government. So what I'm seeing is that we are coming together, and of course the debt levels have to come down, and that means, I'm sorry, austerity. It means tough fiscal discipline for several years. And at the same time, what I think everybody has pointed out here, markets have to work more. And then we have an open question, how much should be done at the national level and how much should be done at the EU level?
And then once you complete banking union, and I thank you for your brevity, you would say that's enough, that's as far as we need to go, or does it then need to move on fiscal integration, towards integration on the fiscal side, as the Minister was saying, on mutualization of debt, not just mutualization of banking liabilities?
Yeah, here we had a disagreement. You pointed it out immediately, Anton, that on Eurobonds. I don't think that Eurobonds are necessary. I don't think that a mutualization of national debt is necessary. In the United States, you don't have a mutualization of state debt. There were massive defaults in the 1840s in the United States after one of the many investment booms that are typical for a capitalist economy. And something like 7 or 8 states went bankrupt. Washington did not bail them out. And that is the pattern. And we have now seen that Greece has defaulted a year ago. And I think that this should be the role. So how much of fiscal transfer should there be? The US has much more fiscal transfer than I think that the European structure needs and is prepared politically to accept. So at present, it's only 1% of GDP that goes in structural funds. It could be slightly more, but I don't think that there's political acceptance for much more than we see today.
Thank you very much. I have lots of questions, but I don't want to monopolize the discussion. I think we have about 40 minutes for discussion. So can we have some hands for people who want to ask questions? I'll try and take a few. I beg you to be brief, although any additional points you want to make are welcome, but keep them brief and we can keep the conversation going. Thank you very much. I see one there and I see one here.
My name is Andrius. I worked for last 4 years together with Valdis Dombrovskis as Prime Minister of Lithuania. So I would like to add some comments on what Valdis was speaking and also one question. So especially to that question, what is needed? What does it mean something else? If you look into our story with the recession back in 2009 with minus 15% in GDP, so of course what we did at first, that was simple austerity, cuts in expenditure, just to keep deficit under control and then to diminish the deficit. But besides that, we did something else. We went through internal devaluation, which allowed us to cut really by 15% in labor cost. With the cuts in labor cost, we regained competitiveness of our economy. And when we regained competitiveness of our economy, we regained also capability of our business to come back to export markets. So today we have something like 50% larger nominal export numbers than we had before the crisis. When I looked into Italian numbers, and perhaps I can ask our colleague, Italian Member of Parliament, or Anders Åslund, when I looked into Italian numbers, so you really are good in controlling deficit, but I do not see that you are gaining anything in your exports. Exports numbers are still lower than it was before the crisis. So my question is, what was happening with the labor cost in Italy?
Thank you. And there was a gentleman over here.
Yeah. François Géret from France. My question is related to the so-called fiscal union. And probably yesterday you've read the piece by Jacques Delors and former Chancellor Schröder. They made the case that it has been foolish to have a common currency without a common fiscal policy, or even a common fiscal union. Having said that, my question is very simple. To all of you, do you think that all the governments in the Eurozone are ready for such a move? And if they are not, what are the risks of a new fragmentation between those countries which are, let's say, enough politically mature to go in that direction, and those who think that it is unnecessary or that it is politically damageable? And so how can you avoid that new kind of rift inside the Eurozone, and how can you reconcile all the members of the Eurozone on a common goal in that specific area? Thank you.
And I'll take one more question from President Ilves.
I'll stay away from the financial, fiscal, and side of this, but rather sort of more from the psychological European point of view. Estonia has twice bailed out countries, both with EFSF and with ESM. In the case of Greece, our average salary was 10% below the minimum salary of Greece. And we have 12-month salaries, they have 14-month salaries, so we're talking about the monthly salary. So we have, their retirement age is 50 for civil servants, it's 64, and the average pension in Greece is 4 times higher than it is in Estonia. Now, when we hear about the responsibility of bailing people out, of debt mutualization. And we also read about how austerity is causing the rise of populism. Well, what do you think are the risks of populism, anti-European attitudes in a country like this, which follows the rules? We just follow the rules. I mean, we can be stupid because we follow the rules, but we do follow the rules. And then countries that do not follow the rules, that are far richer than we are, then get bailed out by us. It is not, I mean, this is not a sustainable sort of policy. And I mean, this is why I was glad there was a solution to the Cyprus problem, because if you add on top of that, that you're bailing out Russian oligarchs with laundered money, I mean, this would not really go through the parliament with great ease. I mean, it wouldn't go through. And I suspect there is also an element here that I think that in a number of countries, I mean, the bad guys, the Dutch, the Germans, the Estonians, the Finns, have reached the end of their rope. And I don't see any willingness to continue to do another bailout. It's just that this is never talked about because you talk about Syriza and you talk about Golden Dawn, but you don't talk about the people who actually follow the rules, are quiet, don't riot, but are doing in this position, which is why I think there's an element missing in this discussion, which is that I mean, the people who are doing the right thing are at the end of their rope, frankly. And so you can talk about things like, let's do debt mutualization. I don't think the people who are paying into the countries in trouble are really love the idea of debt mutualization. So you have the responsible people not liking debt mutualization. I mean, the Germans are first and foremost. And then the countries that have not followed the rules asking for debt mutualization. I don't think that's politically viable.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we should go back to our panel. Maybe I'll take them in the same order, Mr. Teixeira. And particularly if you'd address this question of bailout fatigue, yeah. Which would be interesting, and the sort of balance of growth and fiscal discipline.
I am very sensitive to the psychological argument that was just presented, and but I should recall that not all member countries are Greece, and even countries that now are in trouble. So I think we should to look and see a little bit beyond the Greek situation and those Greek examples that have just been mentioned. When we talk about fiscal union and also when we talk about debt mutualization, let me think out loud with you some aspects. First, on a theoretical point of view, and there is an extensive economic literature on monetary unions, we are all aware that the European Monetary Union is something atypical because we don't have the fiscal side, as we should on a theoretical point of view. And we believed that we could have the Stability and Growth Pact as a substitute for that. And my view is that the experience with the Stability and Growth Pact has not been a convincing one for markets. And that's the reason why markets do not believe strongly on that institutional arrangement as they appear to believe in the beginning of the euro. And that this is calling for something stronger that we may call the fiscal union. Also, when we talk on fiscal union, we need to talk about a fiscal side, a fiscal instrument or fiscal means of intervention at a macroeconomic level for the euro area as a whole. let me call it some kind of a federal budget that we don't have in the euro area, like the United States have. And this common budget, or common European budget, implies some kind of financing. And this financing should be on the basis of a mutualization by nature. Mutualization does not imply necessarily that we should take the actual debts of member countries. But in some way, we are already mutualizing those debts. For example, in the end of the Portuguese program, almost 1/2 of our debt will correspond to debt to the institutional creditors, IMF and European lenders. If we consider that we need to make some kind of a restructuring of this debt, aren't we sharing the risk of the Portuguese debt already? This is some kind of mutualization. When the ECB decides to intervene in secondary markets, the way they decided in last September, aren't we mutualizing the debts of sovereigns in an indirect way? Yes, we are. So let's not delude ourselves on that. We are already mutualizing that. And we foresee situations in which we will have to mutualize that debt. In terms of the question of austerity, I don't like the word also. I sympathize with fiscal discipline or fiscal responsibility, as has been said. And of course, no doubt that countries who face significant imbalances, they have to do their work. And Portugal, Greece, Spain, we have, of course, to correct these budget imbalances that we have. And we need restrictive policies. So we cannot solve our problems in other way. But the point is that in the absence of a European component in tackling with the crisis, we are kind of doomed to a higher level of austerity, because our national efforts could be substantially leveraged if we had some kind of European policy that could ease the way markets are looking at European economies. For example, if we look at the progress that anyway have been done in Ireland, in Portugal, in Spain, even in also in Italy, a little bit more modest in Greece, but there has been some progress in fiscal consolidation. Did markets react substantially to that? No, it was a very, very modest reaction when we look at interest rate spreads. But when our leaders announced that they will go on with a banking union, when the ECB decided and announced that we will undertake outright monetary transactions, look what happened to spreads in markets. Markets reacted very, very significantly to these EU-level decisions. So my point is that we need to make our national adjustments, and for that, we need fiscal discipline. But we need European solutions. And look the way markets react when we have major steps, bold steps at the European level.
Thank you very much.
That's my point.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, if you do join the euro, do you share the President's concerns about another bailout not being politically feasible? for the creditor countries?
Well, once we join the Eurozone, we understand it comes as a part of package. So basically, if we want to join, we have to accept it. That's quite clear. And among other things, we were also among countries which were bailed out, including by European Commission and some EU member states. So, in this sense, we take it as a package deal. Of course, when we look at our economical pluses and minuses, we took also into consideration our contributions to ESM for that sake, but we'll still see the balance largely positive. But then to come to this question of fiscal union, federal budgets and other aspects. First, it's to mention that basically just a couple of months ago, EU heads of state and government voted on something quite unique. They voted on less Europe for next 7 years. For the first time ever, we voted less European budget for next 7 years. So, and I don't think that we'll be achieving more Europe with less European budget. But that's exactly what we were able to agree, and Latvia was not among the countries which was very keen to have less European budget. But somehow that's what it's happened. Then, so I'm not very optimistic on our rapid moves towards fiscal union, knowing what's happening in the council, and then in fact we are deciding exactly the opposite things. We are deciding less Europe. But if we are to discuss this fiscal union, as it was already noted, that joint responsibility implies joint decision-making. And then it becomes a question which is equally difficult for whatever you say, north-south, net payers, not net receivers, are national parliaments in EU member states willing to give up their authority on national budgets? And then who will decide national budgets? European Commission, European Council by some kind of voting procedures, qualified majority or whatever. And then it becomes a really difficult question. How do you balance this joint decision-making, which means that national parliaments will not have a full say on the budgets. It will be somebody in Brussels, Council or Commission saying, no, no, no, in this budget you cannot have so much deficit, you cannot increase so much spending, and so. And only then you can have this also opposite part, that yes, then there is a demutualization and whatever, then there's also a joint responsibility, because the one will not work without the other. And generally, I understand also that this economic logic says that with joint currency, we should be having also joint fiscal policy. And then the question is, how do we get there? There was Stability and Growth Pact, which was expected that there are joint rules which all countries have to follow, and then we can have a joint currency. Then it happens that many countries were not following. In fact, if you look, most Eurozone countries are not fulfilling Maastricht criteria. So then probably something else needs to be done. But then this something else implies giving up part of the sovereignty over its budgets. And this is not going to be an easy debate, even though economically, apparently that's where it should be heading.
Can I just be absolutely clear? So when you use the term fiscal union, are you talking about the same thing as Mr. Teixeira dos Santos is talking about, which is some kind of mutualized debt? I mean, are you saying you're willing to go down that route given the right conditions of control and joint decision making, or are you saying, like Anders, I don't want to go there at all?
No, what I was saying that, that's where what we seem to agree is that if we are going down that road, there has to be also joint decision-making on the national budgets. And this I understand as a very difficult debate for all countries, Now go to your parliaments and tell, no, you will not have a say on your budget. Parts of it or important elements of it will be decided in Brussels. Now we have something similar with issues like this European semester and country-specific recommendations, but as the name says, those are recommendations. And then you can follow recommendations or not, but then it has to be something which is not recommendations, which is kind of country-specific demands. And politically it's going to be very difficult.
So let's go to a parliamentarian. How much sovereignty are you willing to give up from the national parliament?
The maximum. The maximum. But I think this is really the point. It is not really giving up sovereignty, it's gaining sovereignty, moving it to the European Union level. Because you mentioned populism. I come from a country and a parliament where, let's say, 1/3, I would define it populist, and 1/3 anti-system. And then it's our small part. No, that's a joke, no. But it is not only a matter of populism now. It is a matter of anti-system, anti-national governments, anti-European government, anti-European Union. A country like Italy, that is a country of Spinelli, of the Gasperi, is a country where 1/3 of the electorate voted for a party or for a movement that clearly asks for getting out of the European Union, basically, and another 1/3 for a party that is thinking of it. And that's Italy. That's not UK. That it's an alarm. That is saying, if we don't move our decisions, our responsibilities, our discussions, our decision-making process to the European level, so we share decisions and responsibilities. Otherwise, the democratic system of our countries will collapse. Because you were saying that no matter what national decision, we have to take the right national decisions. And again, I come from a country where we passed one of the toughest reforms of the pension system in 1 week in Parliament in Italy without one single protest in the streets. 1 year ago, 1 year and a couple of months ago with the Monti government. That was one of the first acts of the government. Without one single day of strike. And we have very strong trade unions. That is because citizens realize that we have reforms to do. We realize that we have a fiscal discipline to put in place. We realize that we cannot live as we used to live in the 80s. We know that, especially our generation, my generation. But we know also that no matter what national decisions we take, if there is not a European framework that goes in the right direction, it will not be enough. It will never be enough. Look at the reactions to the European elections. We have been basically for 2 months with no government, no president of the republic, and for a little bit of time even without the Pope. And markets didn't react.
That's serious.
Markets didn't react at all, at all. There was no change. And people start to feel that it doesn't really matter, that politics doesn't really matter, because otherwise, in any case, you don't change policies, because the real decisions are taken up there. So that's why I'm saying ready to give up, to regain all the powers that we do not have in the national parliaments anymore, because these decisions, the only way of making them really, really having an impact on our economies is on the European level. In this sense, I can say Italy is back in Europe, because in the last years, this hasn't been the Italian position. Now I could say that with this large and strange government that we have, this is going to be our strong position in all the European places. Let me add just one small thing, because there was one specific question about Italy. First of all, I don't think Italy will need help. What we need is to be able to restart investing. I will give you one example. You mentioned export. We passed last week a law to allow the state and the public administration to pay back its own debts to enterprises. Because we have a situation where for the Internal Stability Pact, even local authorities that have money, or in any case, even those that do not have money, haven't, for a certain time, paid for the works that they've done. So enterprises are actually waiting for money that the state owns them, which is we're talking about fiscal discipline, which is the basis of discipline of normal relationship between the public administration and the private sector. We need to free resources and to invest them in our system. Our system is strong. Our small and medium enterprises are strong. Our economy is strong. If we, together with the austerity measures that we have already taken, start freeing up a little bit of resources to put inside the private sector and the economic sector. We need to make the engine restart. And then the engine will work, because I think the Italian economy is strong, and that's the main difference with other countries. We need to have, on the European level, this decision of freeing up a little bit of resources that we have to restart the engine and make it work.
Thank you very much. Anders, there was a question, I'm aware, earlier about labor costs, as well as any of the other points that you want to reply. We've got 17 minutes left. I would urge everybody to be really brief, and then we're like at the Twitter stage of the proceedings. 140 characters, your questions, please. Please condense them as you wait.
Yeah, if I may take 5 quick points. One is I hear here in the discussion that there is an underlying difference that is not understood between the Baltics and Southern Europe during the crisis. And there was a fundamental difference in the fall of 2008, and that was the policy of the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank gave no liquidity whatsoever to the Baltic countries. And that was the cause of these massive output falls. And there's no justification for that. At the same time, the ECB flooded Southern Europe with liquidity, and there's no justification for that either. Because that meant that the crisis in Southern Europe was delayed, and therefore the problems were aggravated. So the ECB should have given some liquidity to the Baltics, and should have given much less to Southern Europe, so that the crisis in Portugal had erupted in 2008, and then it would have been much easier for you to handle the crisis. And the same with Italy. That would have put Berlusconi in quite a tough spot. And with regard to Andreas Kobilius' point then about labor cost adjustment, I happen to have these numbers in my head. The biggest adjustment of unit labor cost since 2008 has been in Latvia with 20%. Lithuania indeed did very well. Greece has now actually done 10%, and Italy has only done a few percent. So Italy has an adjustment ahead when it comes to unit labor costs, which I think is very difficult to avoid. I would like to turn to Thomas.
The point was specifically about labor costs, not unit labor costs, which include productivity gains.
Yeah, but the unit labor cost is the statistics I look up on. Sorry. It's similar with labor
But the point is, you're saying the adjustment had to come in labor costs rather than in attempting to get productivity gains, on which there is also a division.
Yeah, there is also a productivity gain in the Baltic countries. On President Ilves' points, I totally agree. I think that the Greece program was the worst. The May 2010 IMF-EU program was the worst in IMF history. It was far too much money, sorry, part of it from Estonia, and it shouldn't have been so much money. There were no expenditure cuts as a share of GDP that has come out of it. Greece has increased its public expenditure as a share of GDP, which is a sheer scandal. So Greece has now 54% of GDP in public expenditure, and we can compare with the Baltic countries that are 35 to 38% of GDP, which is where you should be. And there's no justification for that. And there were 2 large tax hikes, which of course hit growth. And there were no structural reforms whatsoever in the most overregulated market in Europe. And, of course, no sacking of civil servants. So what happened? No confidence and no growth. at least 6% of continuous decline for the last 2 years of 6-7% of a decline in output. It's an outrage. So you're perfectly justified to be outraged. And therefore, this will not happen again. So I think that the Cypriot program, as it came out, was sensible. If you have large bank deposits and no other assets, take it. It's 100,000 euro that is the banking, the deposit guarantee. That's fine. On the French question, well, I think I already explained that in the US, if a state goes bankrupt, if California goes bankrupt, as was the discussion a couple of years ago, it does go bankrupt. It does default. And we now saw recently that Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania, went bankrupt. So much for it. There is no federal responsibility in the United States for a state or a city that goes bankrupt. So that's perfectly possible. It just has to be clarified. And in fact, it was clarified with Greece. A colleague of mine at the Peterson Institute, Randall Henning, has written an excellent paper about the lessons of fiscal federalism in the United States and consequences for the European Union that goes on these lines. It's on the Peterson Institute website. Finally, 2 small points with reference to a Portuguese friend. There is a distinction between the monetary and fiscal policy, which is not very clear. But this is not a reason to do away with it altogether. So I do support the ECB measures, but I don't support Eurobonds. I draw the line there. But I agree that it's not very clear. And the second point about markets, indeed, they are capricious. And as I see it, that is a reason to be overcautious, rather than saying that more should be, latitude should be allowed. So in late 2008, both Latvia and Romania lost access to international debt markets, although their public debt was less than 20% of GDP. So you never know when you lose market access. If you are big, like the United States or Japan, then you can have a market access at enormous debt levels, which is not a reason to have a high public debt, but you can get away with it. For small countries, it's much more difficult.
Thank you very much. We've got 11 minutes and 7 seconds left.
Sorry about
please be extremely brief. I had one here who's been waiting for a very long time. Thank you. And then over there. And then there was one in the middle, I think.
Thank you. My name is Jan Priisola, and I'm from Estonian Information System Authority. But I was studying in France, and they were teaching us that to come out of the crisis, actually, you have to rebuild the industry. So industry policy. And when I ask actually that now you're in the European Union, your biggest this kind of policy is agricultural policy. It doesn't end up, they started actually to defend this agricultural policy. But the question is that is this crisis enough actually to open this agricultural subsidies question, or it will be the next one? Thank you.
Thank you. One here, one. Okay. Gentleman over there had it first. Yeah, from her, yeah. And then you can give it to Alan Riley.
Okay. My name is İlter Turan from Istanbul Bilgi University. Prime Minister Dombrovskis, you seem to be unique in being so enthusiastic in joining the Eurozone, where others fear to tread at this moment. What kind of domestic opposition do you have? I mean, oppositions are emerging in countries that are already in the euro, and they make sometimes rather persuasive arguments. So what's the opposition to your policies here? Then let me also direct a question, general question, and Anton, you direct it to the proper person. When we take up these topics like rebuilding Europe's economy, there seems to be a tacit assumption that we have a list of difficult countries and that have to improve themselves. Are there other difficult countries that we have failed to talk about and that may actually make the problem worse than it appears to be now? I mean, sometimes people mention France as a possibility. I'm not able to judge. So who wants to take up that question? Huh?
Thank you. And there was one here and then there.
Thank you. Matti Maasikas from the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I have a short question to Federica Mogherini. You were willing to pool more sovereignty on fiscal matters. But in the real life terms, how will the Italian parliament be persuaded to amend your country's annual budget, where there will be disagreements between say, Brussels and Rome? Who is the credible person to come down to Rome from Brussels and convince you and your colleagues that some amendments need to be done? Will it be Vice President Rehn? Will it be the Italian Commissioner Tajani? Who will it be?
Thank you. Yep, one more here.
Alan Riley, City University. My point is following up from some of the comments about the common agricultural policy and growth. Surely, if we are serious about trying to develop growth, we have to look at the existing European Union budgets. And as President Ilva said earlier, there are some at least very serious questions about the uses to which the common agricultural budget is deployed. And we could use that budget for innovation, for R&D, for useful infrastructure, which would have economic multipliers. Surely there is a time and a place for the North European states to push that in no uncertain terms in this age of austerity. The other point about it is really, and this is my question, is sure, the way we get off the rocks, of all the fiscal rocks, is by growth and increasing, significant increase in the size of the European Union economy. The United States has grown almost a United Kingdom since 2008 in terms of its overall economic size. Now, we need to be able to have that growth as well. And yet this story, we're moving down the road towards hopefully some US-EU trade pact.
Can I ask you to ask the question?
Well, my point is that the speed and dynamism needed here to have growth measures, whether it's increasing the integrated single market, the trade pact, or other measures which could be taken to actually deliver growth without spending huge amounts of money. Where are these measures, and why aren't we doing it much, much faster? Sure, this should have been run in parallel with all of the ECB and fiscal measures that we're taking to deal with the Eurozone.
Thank you. And one last question over there.
Right. A question to Anders Åslund. Martin Wolf wrote a couple of weeks ago that the rest of Europe can learn nothing from Estonia and other Baltic states because they are very particular cases. When I listen to you, I rather think that you disagree with Martin Wolf. Is my interpretation correct?
Yes. I can answer that one. Okay. Okay. One more here, and then sorry. And gentlemen's been waiting for a long time. Yeah.
Could you panelists speculate on these quite clear, slightly different approaches that have been demonstrated by President Ilves and the Prime Minister Dombrovskis on the issues of possible bailouts in future? This is a quite clear difference between those who already did participate in those bailouts sometime before and those who did not do it yet because it's probably in the future. Probably some countries already tired of these bailouts, and probably in some time maybe only Latvia will be able to do, or will be ready to, at least publicly, to do it. So probably it will be not enough for any future bailouts. So what other options would be available for those who happen to be in this situation, especially if common budget is not an option anytime soon?
Thank you. And one last but not least.
Thank you. I would have a small and very friendly provocation to Minister dos Santos. I very much appreciate your reference to need for further fiscal, whether it's union or is it more cooperation in terms of how to support the functioning of currency union. And I have to say that while we are in many respects in difficult situation because this crisis has generated bad mood in the union. And on the other hand, there is no are there periods in history when Estonians have known better Greek pensions or Portuguese teacher salaries or Irish child allowances? So actually it has brought us very much closer. So this fiscal policy is a very important thing in this context. But how you interpret in this your constitutional court decisions on your fiscal policy cuts? You can say that this, of course,
I'm going to interrupt you. We've got 3 minutes and 41 seconds left.
My question is actually short. The argument is that it shows that constitutions are not ready for currency union, much deeper than we think. What is your proposal? Should we change those constitutions for that case?
Thank you very much. So I've tried to gather up the questions. Please don't feel you have to answer everything. Answer just the ones that are most burning to your heart. We've had a question about industry. We've had a question on the need for industrialization, a question about the common agricultural policy, the domestic opposition in Latvia, the ability or otherwise of the Italian, where does budget sovereignty lie in Italy? Do we need more growth measures such as single market? Why aren't they moving faster? Does Anders Åslund disagree with Martin Wolf? Yes. If not a bailout in future, then what? And the question of whether Portugal now has its own Karlsruhe. Let's go the other way.
Financial Times published my letter of disagreement with Martin Wolf. Andrei Lariono's question, yes, there will be much less bailouts. This is a good thing. And there will be therefore much larger public expenditure cuts, if anything is required in the future. And there will be little or no bailout of bank bondholders. I think Ireland was the big mistake, and the Cypriot case shows a much better tendency. Is there any other crisis coming? Slovenia has a bank problem that is too small to solve for the time being. That's the only problem that I see additionally coming up. France is a future problem since we are pursuing a disastrous economic policy, but it's too rich to be a problem right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I admire your brevity. Yes, Federica.
I think that the approach is wrong, if I can say so. I don't think that there is anyone that has to come to Rome from Brussels, because we are also Brussels. Italy is there, and as long as all other European Union partners are there, we will share our policies. It is not a matter of sending a commissioner. It's a matter of deciding together in Brussels, because one of the problems we've had is that always, I'm sure it's the same in all other countries, it's always Brussels demanding something, and that's the unpopular side is always moved somewhere else. No, we have to share decisions and we have to share responsibilities. And let me add a couple of small things. One, it is not only the tools that we missed in the European Union integration, it's also the political will. And the EU budget is a perfect example of this. I also think that it was a scandalous decision taken a couple of months ago, and that we have to invest more in the EU budget and to change priorities. And said by a country like Italy that has a large agricultural sector, it's news. We have to invest more, probably not so much on industrial policies, but on what is our real richness and resource, which is research quality of production. That is the core business of European economy, I think. And the last point, we have to boost the internal demand. No matter how big export we can have, unless we move the demand of our own European consumers, our economies will never, never recover fully. I think that this is the priority, and that's why we're pushing for a youth employment pact in the next European Council in June.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister.
Okay, so I'll try briefly to answer two of the questions. One is on a common agricultural policy. The short answer is no, in a sense that this crisis will not affect our policy in common agricultural policy because it's decided for the next 7 years, well, or almost decided. And it's basically no major changes. So it's agreed, and interestingly, I'm myself not a big fan of CAP, but it was one of the main points I was pushing in MFF negotiations when we were dealing in a council. because not that Latvian farmers need bigger subsidies per se, but if other farmers are getting 2 times or 3 times or even 4 times bigger subsidies, then it's a question how you can compete in a very same internal market. So it's a question about unfair competition. And then together with our Estonian and Lithuanian friends, we managed to get a major breakthrough that in 2019, our farmers will be getting as much as Romanian farmers. Well, okay, thank you for that at least. But apart of this, there are no major changes in CAP for next 7 years. Then on this euro adoption opposition, of course there is opposition. And I think there are Eurosceptics in all countries, including Latvia, but which adds to the difficulty that we are joining the Eurozone after 3 years of Eurozone crisis. So it really takes a lot of work for the government to explain what's the reasoning behind, why we think it economically still makes sense for Latvia to join. Of course, also explain all the practicalities to dispel all those myths about joining the euro, that prices will increase very rapidly and so on. But we had launched already several months ago information and communication campaign, and we see that public support for joining Eurozone is gradually improving, and with current tendencies, I hope that by the time we actually join the Eurozone, it would be supported by the majority. And then, even despite of all issues what President Ilves was raising, we know that Estonia also joined Eurozone already during the Eurozone crisis in 2011, and yet around 70% of Estonians think that it was a good idea to join. So I'd expect something similar in Latvia.
Thank you very much. Mr. Teixeira de Santos,
Yeah,
a last brief point.
Yes, I'll try to be very quick. First, the euro area and the European Union, we are diving in a recession. And this calls for more expansionary policies within the euro area. I recall that there is a so-called Agenda 2020, which defines as major objectives sustainable growth, intelligent growth, inclusive growth. Growth, growth, growth. Do not forget that. And here, I think this is an area in which we can develop EU fiscal instruments to promote growth and promote such expansionary policies. So I think fiscal union is necessary. That requires adjustments and constitutional adjustments. There are constitutional problems not only in Portugal. I remember in Holland, in Germany, sometimes when we want to develop European solutions for countries, we face the problems because legislation has to be passed on the constitutional courts of these countries. We have constitutional problems all over Europe, and we need to adjust our constitutions to a new shape of Europe. And I finalize being somewhat politically incorrect. The relation of our countries with Europe has to be more than an affair. We need a real marriage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much to the audience for your questions. And thank you very much to the clock, which stopped several minutes ago, showing that even when you're in deficit, you can always fudge the numbers. And would you
Dear guests, please, does this work? Yeah. Just an administrative announcement for you before you leave this room for lunch that is served just outside of this room, that those who have signed their names down to optional events, buses for different destinations leave at 2 o'clock sharp. You can still join 3 other groups, but the cyber center is full. And for those who do not know yet, the Afghanistan panel will take place at 6 o'clock tonight in this room. So, thank you.